kind of come at this from more of an internet point of view. So I co-founded an ISP and worked on open wireless and things like this. And it's been my impression that the internet was created by going around the carriers. And what enabled that actually was that old Carter phone decision that let you plug whatever you wanted into their network. The result was that people could innovate at their own speed instead of at the speed the carriers wanted to see innovation happening. And I'm afraid that we've lost that principle in the wireless market. That as the vendors talk about reducing churn by putting in sticky services, i.e. ways to lock their customers in, as opposed to offering them ways to do whatever they want on the network, and they'll stick around as long as they can do whatever they want. So I'm expecting that you're going to see a lot of mobile access happening through networks that aren't run by the carriers. The classic attempt in the last few years was the Municipal Wi-Fi. And I was a little bit involved in watching this happen in San Francisco. And the reason it fell apart, well, there were many reasons that it fell apart, but one of the reasons was that the deal that was being offered on Municipal Wi-Fi by Google and Earthlink was tied to tracking the location of everyone who used the network and keeping all that information forever in big Google database in the sky, and in addition to creating that privacy violation, then trying to make money selling ads to those people. It wasn't a public utility in the sense that there's an outlet and you plug your device in and it feeds you power. Right? It was a public utility in the sense that you turn on your Wi-Fi thing and then you have to log into it because it needs to know who you are. Well, why in a free open municipal wireless network does it need to know who you are? And we raised this issue with the city, and we raised it with Google, and basically they were unwilling to budge on it. And that was one of the issues that hung this up all the way through the Board of Supervisors until Earthlink decided there really wasn't any money in it anyway. And that's why it came apart. So, you know, I keep seeing vendors talking about how wonderful the world of wireless will be when they can track you everywhere you go and tell you where your friends are and tell your friends where you are and all that stuff. I don't trust them with that information. And I don't know that a lot of the public does either. I much prefer a location system like GPS, which is receive only and doesn't report where I am to anybody but me. But that's not what the carriers are deploying. I'd also like to talk a little bit about bandwidth and fiber. And I'm glad to see that Verizon is rolling out Fios, but I'm wondering, I haven't seen a fiber service that was the equivalent of T1, for example, right? T1 was what built the internet, right? If you wanted to be an ISP, all you had to do was call up the phone company and say, I'm not a phone company, I don't run wires, you run a wire from here to there for me and charge me what it costs, you know, with your usual regulated markup. And I'll put whatever data I want over that and run whatever protocol I want over that. And you won't control what data goes through there, and I'll be happy. And that enabled not just people with a political in, not just people who know how to manipulate the regulatory system, but anybody who had a better idea of how they wanted to offer communication to their customers to get access to the physical infrastructure and put in a network. Unfortunately, and you can still buy T1 lines and they're cheaper than ever. but nobody wants T1 anymore because they're looking for broadband services. And in the broadband area, the telephone companies have managed to make it, managed to undo the requirement that they share the physical infrastructure. I live in San Francisco, and I looked at getting fiber to my home. I can rent a fiber to my home, a point-to-point fiber that goes from there to anywhere in San Francisco. It will cost me $5,000 a month. And I can't run whatever protocol I want over it because it's a gigabit Ethernet extender service, right? I mean, if they were actually offering me a bare fiber, I could spend $500 at this end and $500 at that end and run my own gigabit Ethernet over it. And if I wanted 10 gig Ether, I'd just upgrade the equipment at the ends. But partly because of a decision made at the FCC, unfortunately while Dave was there, the telcos went whining to the FCC that if the rule that said they had to share their physical infrastructure with everybody else would apply to fiber, then they weren't going to roll out any fiber. And of course this was a patent falsehood, because they'd been rolling out fiber for more than a decade, probably 2 decades at that point, and it was the most cost-effective thing for them to do. But what they understood and the FCC didn't, apparently, was that every time they pulled a fiber, they also pulled another 99 or 200 dark fibers, and that if those fibers were available to their competitors, then there'd be some real price competition in that market. And because they're not required to lease out those dark fibers to other people who want to use them, it means everybody has to pull their own separate fiber, and only a small number of companies are interested in going through all the rigmarole to do that. So I think that is the biggest reason US high bandwidth services lag the rest of the world. My house has 3 different fibers owned by 3 different organizations within half a block of it, and I can't get a point-to-point, plug it into my own equipment fiber from any of them.